keep in mind that not all tornadoes are going to look like the classic image that we see in Wizard of Oz. Some cases they may be rain-wrapped, and so it will look like a heavy downpour rather than the actual tornadic event that it is. In other cases, it may be after dark, and it's much more difficult to see those events at night than it is during the day. So again, when there's a warning issued, pay attention and take cover as quickly as possible.
Spring officially arrives March 20th, and with it comes an increased chance for lightning, thunderstorms, flash floods, and tornadoes. Those severe weather events can cause widespread damage, and in the worst case, loss of life. While we can't control the weather, we can take steps to protect ourselves and families when severe weather occurs. On today's Sound Living, severe weather preparedness. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Kansas State University climatologist Mary Knapp says that having a severe weather plan, practicing that plan, and then putting it into action when severe weather hits is the best way to stay safe during severe weather events. Mary, as we think about severe weather, in Kansas we automatically think of tornadoes, but there are other weather events that we also need to keep in mind. We've already seen some kind of strange weather this year.
Right. Well, we could start out first with our winter events with the ice and blizzard conditions, and unfortunately there were a number of fatalities associated with those outbreaks. Most of those are traffic-related, but again, what people need to be careful about in that winter driving situation is slow down, leave a little bit more distance between you and the other car around you, and just be more cautious as the conditions develop. And keep in mind also that sometimes the worst of it isn't when you're getting 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 inches of snow. It's when you're getting a couple hundredths of an inch of freezing glaze that is very difficult to see, but is extremely, extremely slippery and dangerous.
We are assuming that the spring weather will eventually arrive in Kansas, and when it does, we kind of go through that transition period where we can see all sorts of different kinds of weather.
Yes, as we go into the spring, we can have the severe weather that people normally associate with spring, and that includes strong winds, hail, heavy rain, and an occasional tornado. But it also can be a time where those severe events are followed by extreme cold, and you get the snow and blizzards on the back side of that. Another risk that will be elevated this spring will be the risk of flooding. We have a lot of ground that is still frozen. We have ground that is very, very saturated. So that means if we get what would be a normal rain event, that water has nowhere to go, and it's more likely to run off, collect in the roadways, collect in the ditches, and produce that flooding issue. It's a good time for people to remember the turn around, don't drown mantra. In other words, if the roadway ahead of you is flooded, don't try and drive through it. It doesn't take that much to lift a car and move it laterally. And you also can't be certain what's underneath that waterway. It could be that the road base itself has collapsed. So again, if there's water running over the roadway, don't try and drive through it. Try and find an alternate route or wait for it to subside and drain off.
Floods are actually the number one killer.
Actually, it's a kind of a toss-up between floods and lightning, and it varies from year to year, but both of those historically have killed more people than tornadoes.
We've already seen some tornadoes around the country this year. In terms of being prepared and taking cautionary measures, what type of things should we be keeping in mind?
Well, the first thing is to make sure you have your emergency kit, and that would be something that you would have prepared that would have the necessary supplies, such as flashlights, any medication that's necessary, food and water. Another idea is to throw in something that's entertaining to divert you while you're waiting for that storm to clear, and that may be a deck of cards, some coloring books, something like that that gives you some peace and quiet while you're waiting out the event. It's also very valuable to have a weather radio, and that is a radio that's specifically tuned towards the National Weather Service severe storms alerts. You can have it programmed for your particular area, and that helps you get those alerts directly, and you're not worried about whether your cable's gone out, whether your satellite dish is still receiving, whether you've lost power on your phone. You've got that extra line to the updated information.
And that's important because you can, as you say, you can really target it to your area or maybe even where some of the storms typically approach from.
Right. And so you can program it for what area that is of interest to you. So, for example, in the Manhattan area, we might throw in Morris and Geary County, maybe Clay County, because that's the direction which most of our storms proceed from. You can also target it more narrowly, so you're not getting woken up every time a storm breaks out in some other part of the region that may be past you and not one that you need to take any action to reach safety.
We've talked about this in the past, but we really want to start taking notice when they start issuing watches because that means a warning could be coming.
Right. What a watch does is give you the chance to refresh your plans, make sure that you've got everything targeted, and also allow you to check that weather on a more frequent basis than you might otherwise and look for those conditions to develop. By the time you get a warning, that means that you need to take action immediately. And it goes a lot more smoothly if you have a plan in place and you know what you would do in that particular situation. And that will vary from family to family, household to household, and time of day even. What you might have to do if the kids are in school and you're at work will be different than if you're all at home for the evening.
Typically, we want to try and put as many walls between us and the outside.
That's one of the better rules. What you want to do is find an interior room with the smallest roof span and the most structural support. If you have a below ground level, that would be a good place to go. But again, you want to be cautious that you're not going to below ground where you've got sliding glass patio doors that could become missiles. So again, evaluate what the risks are and locate the safest area in your particular situation.
So in some cases, that might be a closet or even a bathroom.
Right. It may be a closet, it may be a bathroom, it may be an interior pantry, whatever has the most structural integrity and has the least exposure to blowing debris or falling debris.
And again, that's where you want to keep your emergency kit and all those other materials.
Right. So you don't have to be gathering that up as you're trying to avoid the storm. You're going to have it there, go and wait out the event. The other thing that is very valuable with that is to practice on a regular basis what you would do, particularly if you have small children in the household. So it's an opportunity to run through your severe weather plans, maybe go to that area and wait it out a little bit, and snack on those treats that you have in there so that you can rotate out and make sure that what is kept in your emergency kit is fresh.
This also gives them a little bit more of a sense of what's going to happen so that maybe they won't be so anxious when it is a real event.
Right. Again, it gives you an idea of what precautions you're taking and what they need to do in order to stay safe.
In terms of how quick these can approach, because we know that the weather conditions in Kansas can change rapidly, another good idea for having that weather radio or some other type of alert system, but it can turn very quickly.
Yes, it can, very, very quickly. The ability to spot a tornado has increased dramatically with the advent of the Doppler radar. But even with that, there's going to be some place that it touches down first. So the warning in previous decades might have been as the storm was on the ground approaching. Now you might have as much as 9 minutes warning, and in some cases it's even longer. But again, it behooves you to be careful and be alert to those changing conditions so that you can take your actions as expeditiously as possible.
When those warnings are issued, that's the time that we hit that safety spot that we've identified in our homes. We don't wait around and look out the windows and do all the other stuff, run around the house. That's when you're really supposed to be taking cover.
Right. When they issue the warning, that means take action now. You don't need to go out and visually verify that there's a tornado on the ground or in the vicinity. And keep in mind that not all tornadoes are going to look like the classic image that we see in Wizard of Oz. Some cases they may be rain-wrapped, and so it will look like a heavy downpour rather than the actual tornadic event that it is. In other cases, it may be after dark, and it's much more difficult to see those events at night than it is during the day. So again, when there's a warning issued, pay attention and take cover as quickly as possible.
And that stepping outside can be dangerous because flying debris is something that is going to happen.
Right, and you don't actually have to have a tornado to have dangerous, damaging winds. And every year we have straight-line winds that can produce what would appear to be tornadic damage, and those can be just as deadly as a tornado. It may not have the twist in it that a tornado does, but if you've got a 2x4 flying across the yard, it is just as deadly.
The Fujita scale, that is determined by wind speed?
What the Fujita scale or the enhanced Fujita scale is based on is the damage that is estimated to be produced by certain wind speeds. So they don't really have this particular wind. What they're looking at is this damage would occur if the winds were in this range, and that's how they determine what the Fujita scale would rate.
So anytime there is a tornado warning, there's the possibility that the winds could be well in excess of 100 miles per hour.
Oh, very much so. We had a weather station down at Heston when the Heston tornado went through. It didn't actually strike that area, but we saw recorded winds in excess of 120 miles per hour. And unfortunately, very few of the anemometers survive the interior of a tornado simply because there's so much debris flying around that can break those anemometers.
You mentioned the new radar systems and things like that, but how important, especially in a state like Kansas, are just spotters who are out there?
Well, the spotters enhance the information that's available from those radar systems. And so they're able to give on-the-ground updates of this particular radar image that you might be seeing is producing this kind of weather on the ground. And so, yes, it's extremely valuable to let those in the emergency management and the National Weather Service know what's happening.
Sometimes we are stuck out on the road when these events happen. What can we do if we happen to be traveling?
Well, a couple of things that you can do if you happen to be traveling. First is pay attention to what's being forecast along the area. Make sure you know what county or what the nearest town is in the area that you're traversing, because you may not be familiar with that particular region. So that if they say, for example, that there is a severe storm warning for Ellis County and you're still in Saline County, you're going, okay, wait a minute, I'm heading west, I'm going to go through this area. Maybe I'll stop and take a coffee break and wait for that storm to pass before I go any further. So if you can delay your travel and let that severe weather pass before you have to reach that area, that's the safest thing. If you get caught and there's nowhere to go, one of the best things to do is leave your vehicle and get to a lower level. You've got kind of a catch-22 on that. Do I get out of the car and get down in the ditch where there might be flooding, or I'm at risk from lightning, or do I stay in the car and become an airborne missile that bounces all over the place? So far, the best data that they've been able to show is it's much more survivable if you're out in a lower level, protecting your head from the wind and the flying debris.
We know that weather is going to occur in Kansas. The main thing here that we're really trying to stress is be aware of that fact and have a plan. Know what you're going to do.
Right. Pay attention to what's coming and have your plan and be prepared to act on that plan, because the best plan in the world doesn't do you much good if you don't actually utilize it.
That's Kansas State University climatologist Mary Knapp. For more information on severe weather preparedness and safety, contact your county or district extension office or go to www.ksre.ksu.edu. You can also find information online at weather.gov. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.